Hello. So in this lecture, we're going to deal with gender in the Muslim world after the death of Muhammad. But before I do that, I want to show you a documentary uh, produced by a brilliant historian named Bethany Hughes. And of course, as a man teaching this lecture, or this course, I should say, in the old days when we would meet in person, I would invite a good number of women speakers into the class. Of course, now that's been made impossible. So I'm going to try to do it virtually by allowing female speakers into the class, although via video, that is. And so what I want to show in the following is Bethany Hughes' documentary called Divine Women. And this particular episode, or this part of this episode, deals with the life of Khadija, the woman we talked about in the last week, the first Muslim, the wife of Muhammad. Oh wait, hold on, let me make sure I'm sharing sound, that would help. Okay, here we go. And I'll pause there. Now, of course, you're free to watch the video on your own. Keep in mind, this is an unlicensed version of a BBC video. So, however, if you choose, in the name of learning about divine women, I'll just show the URL there. It's an excellent series, actually, but this was all that was related to this class. All these unfortunate videos below, I've never used this site. I don't know why Miss Italia is coming on this video, so don't think this is based on my search habits. I just used this website for the first time today. How embarrassing. I'm not sure if the Miss Italy is the most embarrassing part or how many tabs I have open. And that Netflix is next to Cougar Courses, but anyway. Okay, let's stop sharing my embarrassing browsing habit and go to, so in other words, what did we get from that video? Number one, not only a female historian in the voice of Bethany Hughes, but then interviews with Layla Ahmed, who is perhaps one of the most, if I could say, prominent historians of the women in the Middle East. And then Francois Serra, you notice, is not a typical Muslim name. She would be a convert to Islam. And Muslim converts, of course, so whether it's from Khadija to a woman of obvious, European ancestry becoming a Muslim, that is also another story or kind of theme we'll be looking at in this class. Now, keep in mind Francois' opinion of Aisha, okay? We're going to study now in this lecture how her legacy is one that is contested, okay? And what are the historical sources of that contestation? We dealt with it briefly last lecture, but it's going to come out more in the open in this lecture. And so today's lecture is going to be divided into three parts. We're going to look at kind of the 50 years after the death of Muhammad. And in those 50 years, it was quite formative in terms of splitting the Islamic community into two political camps. Those political divisions, that between Shia and Sunni, would later evolve into theological sectarian differences that we have today. Then we're going to look at a span of time from 680 to 1500s, and we're going to do that in an hour. Now, that's not due to me brushing aside women in Islamic history over a wide span of time. That is based on the availability of sources. In other words, 1 hour devoted to that period of time is not so much my out of neglect. It is simply out of histories based on primary sources. And the primary sources left by women during this period is scant. In fact, most of the sources are actually, that I'm going to be focusing on, is on men commenting on women. Okay? And based on those contents, we could start to deduce what were attitudes, and I should say the beginning of kind of retrograde attitudes in Islamic cultures towards women. So what did this documentary say? If you look at during the life of Muhammad and kind of this early period of Islam, the role of women was quite pronounced. What happens after the death of Muhammad is over a slow period of time when Islam no longer is just a religion, but a religion ruling an empire. The position of women degrades, and what was missing in that documentary as a result of patriarchal structures that are going to develop. And that's what we're going to study. What were those patriarchal structures? And just to give you an answer, power. Not so much religious patriarchy, but patriarchy of the state is the answer. As well as cultural patriarchy. Cultural patriarchy is going to seep into what is basically, so you have Islam as a faith, a set of ideas, and then you have cultural practices that existed even before Islam was a religion. And those cultural practices are going to result in kind of the degradation and relegation of women in public life. And thus, you're going to have less women producing primary sources. And then finally, our third hour, we're going to be looking at women during the gunpowder empires. Now, what are the gunpowder empires? This refers to the rise of 3 Muslim superpowers in the 1500s. When Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, he was doing that to undermine 3 dominant Muslim powers. And why were they dominant? They harnessed the power of gunpowder. And during this period, we're going to look at gender relations in those empires. So let's begin. So gender in the age of Islamic empires, we're going to look at a period known as the era of the 4 caliphs and the Sunni Shia split. So like I said, it's a kind of intense period of about 50 years that has quite significance for Muslim history. And you might see, what are all these? This is not a class on military history yet. I am giving you the dates of significant battles because in each one of those battles, women played a prominent role. The 4 caliphs are a period that refer to, we talked about what a caliph was in the previous lecture. It's just simply a successor to the Prophet Muhammad. The period of the 4 caliphs refer to when they were elected. What happens after the death of the last caliph, Ali? Muslim empires would have caliphs, but they're no longer elected. They become hereditary positions. For all intents and purposes, the caliph becomes synonymous with the king. And that way, it's when we refer to the era of the 4 caliphs, we're talking about when caliphs were democratically elected. When the last democratically elected caliph named Ali is assassinated, Islamic empires become hereditary empires. They're really dynasties, which are ruled by caliphs who are just caliphs in all but name. They're really kings. Okay. So let's look at Muslim control by the death of Muhammad on the following map. And you see it is just this dark gray area here. Those were all the lands were inhabited by Arab tribes who converted to Islam. We can't really speak of an Islamic empire at this point. This is basically a unification of all the Arab Bedouin tribes and those who are living in cities who are converting to a religion shared by their Byzantine Christian neighbors to the north. Then let's look conquest by the death of Abu Bakr. Now, if you remember, Abu Bakr was the first caliph and the father of Aisha, Muhammad's wife after the death of Khadija. And what happened as a result of in his lifetime? And we're talking about Abu Bakr only ruled for 2 short years. but a significant expansion of Islam to what is the territory known as the Arabian Peninsula. After the death of Abu Bakr, remember there was a group of partisans who were supporting Ali, and the word in Arabic for a partisan is Shia. Oh, what the hell? Sorry, I didn't even touch my mouse. Excuse the foul language. Okay. Anywho, okay. So the thing to understand was after Abu Bakr had passed, the Shi'at al-Ali, or the partisans of Ali, assumed that the caliphate position would go to Ali, but again, he was denied the position. Now remember, he's still a relatively young man, and it goes to an older person named Omar, who would rule for 10 years. And look what happens under the rule of Omar. There are going to be two important battles. One is a battle called Yarmouk. And what would Yarmouk do? It would spread Islamic control into the kind of settled cities of the Byzantine Empire, such as Jerusalem. Now, the first time I mentioned cities, something should now be sparked in your head. What did I say about this city and its kind of what it means for gender parity? The city is always a haven of patriarchy. And when Muslims started to settle in the cities of Jerusalem, and then the other major city of its time, Alexandria, they started to adapt the Greek patriarchal practices of these two cities, because for all intents and purposes, Jerusalem and Alexandria were Greek cities. Okay? So what were some of the patriarchal practices in these cities? If we take, I'm sorry, I forgot another major city, Damascus. Again, for all intents and purposes, a Greek city. Well, remember what I said about ancient Greece, where the oikos was the Greek home, and then there was a place called the gynaeceum where the women were kind of kept out of street view, and that even if a man visited a home, they would never be able to see the women of the household because they were segregated. This starts to become an Islamic tradition. Keep in mind, what was a Greek Christian tradition now is adopted by the Muslims. And you might answer the question, why? Well, why did the Greek men do this? Why did men in antiquity do this? To control their women. Another tradition becomes quite widespread, and that is the Greek veil. Now, if you notice those kind of Greek commercials I showed you about yogurt, if you did watch them, did you notice the elderly Greek women are always veiled? That kind of wearing of the veil becomes now quite, again, widespread amongst these empires, because what do you do in an empire? You adopt the habits of those you conquered. Okay? So that Muslim women being veiled in public is, again, another tradition that we could say is kind of inherited from the Greek tradition. Now, what happens is, after the death of Omar, okay, Ali is skipped over another time. So there's a third caliph. That third caliph, his name is Uthman. He didn't conquer very much. And then look what happened in Ali's period, okay? The Islamic empire really expands. It reaches now, it basically is reaching the Mediterranean. And then you have, under Ali's rule, the conquest of what is today Iran, all the way to the borders of what are the Caucasus Mountains. So that's the political history. Now, within the political history, I'm going to say what is the gendered history. Then, just so we know, and then the second part of this lecture, we're going to study what happens, what is the status of women when Islam expands exponentially all the way to the coast of the Atlantic, Portugal and the north of Spain, and all the way to the borders of China, we see on the east. Okay. What happened to Khansa? Khansa kept on writing poetry, but now as a Muslim. Okay. The Battle of Qadisiyah refers to a battle when the Muslims defeated the last great Persian army. And from that point onwards, when you saw the conquest of Iran, that was because they lost at the Battle of Qadisiyah. Okay. But now notice what her poetry is about. Now this is a much older Khansa, where she is now talking about not somebody who she loved that she lost in battle, but her sons, okay, who fell for what? The cause of Islam. Who says you are dead? You are very much alive because all of you are martyrs. You died now not in the name of fighting other tribes, but of spreading the religion. So what does she say? What does Khansa introduce? This kind of trope, this motif of being pride. I've lost my sons, but at least I can know they died in the name of the faith. And they're guaranteed a special place in the afterlife. I am the mother of the martyrs. From 636, we're going to see how this motif continues all the way into the 21st century. Okay. Now, if we go to the Battle of Yarmouk, so Al-Khansa, this is the primary source written by a woman. And you have to realize, of course, in Arabic, I mean, poetry does get lost in translation, but in Arabic, this would be poetic and profound and powerful. You see what I did there? Poetic, profound, and powerful. That's called alliteration. I'm a poet and I didn't know it. Okay. Al-Baladhuri, on the other hand, is a male historian. And you have to realize, okay, of course, when I say there, that women are going to be kind of dealt with in a kind of fair sweep of history, the reason is because most histories, all histories in fact, not only Muslim histories, but all histories during this period were written by men. Okay? And so, what is history? We depend on those historians writing at the time to tell us about the life, the conditions, the periods they're writing about that reflect their kind of outlook. Okay? And what can we tell is this. Women, if I could use a colloquial phrase, got second fiddle in the great span of writing histories. Nonetheless, the few mentions of women can tell us a lot about a particular period. So the Battle of Yarmouk is where the Muslims defeated the Greek Byzantine Empire, or what was for all intents and purposes, the Eastern Roman Empire. So what can we tell about the battle? There was 24,000 Muslims. Again, we're not sure about these numbers. Because again, the notion of history being entirely accurate and being loyal to the statistics, this is again a modern phenomenon. So for example, when they fought the Greeks, were 70,000 Greeks killed or the remnants took to fly? How would Al-Baladhuri count the numbers? Okay, is he literally counting each number? So, with a historical primary source, you always have to, read it with kind of a grain of salt. What can we, in other words, what could Baladhuri have possibly known and what he couldn't? Okay, numbers, again, take with a grain of salt. But was there, and what did that result in? Certain Muslim women took part and fought violently, which shows us what? That women were on the battlefield. One was Hind. And if you remember Hind, in the last lecture, Hind is a woman who is reviled for resisting Muhammad. Hind, by 636, 4 years after the death of Muhammad, is now on the battlefield helping to spread Islam. Now, look at the name of her son, because her son is going to play a prominent role in this particular area and period, and his name is Muawiyah. Now, remember, Ali is going to have a rival in the form of Aisha. Ali, who is married to Fatima. Okay. But Ali would later also have a rival in the form of Muawiyah. Okay. In other words, in Ali's lifetime. Now, who is Muawiyah? He is the Ibn of Abu Sufyan. Now, what do I say? You didn't have last names back then. Basically, Ibn means I take my descent from Abu Sufyan, my father. He's not called Ibn Hind. Remember, in Islamic tradition, there is only one man who takes his descent directly from the mother, and that is Jesus, son of Maryam. Okay. So keep in mind from this primary source, why is it important? Because it tells us about the Muawiyah. And what is she screaming? In other words, I hate to use this word, but Hind is on the battlefield. Now imagine an elderly woman kind of being like a cheerleader. I can't think of another metaphor that you can explain this concept. And what is she screaming? So just as Khansa, again, forgive the metaphor, would have been like a cheerleader in her day, what is she screaming? Cut the arms of these uncircumcised. Who are the uncircumcised? Well, they're the Greek Christians. Because of the Abrahamic faiths, only two require circumcision: Judaism, and then the Abrahamic faith that took over from Judaism, Islam. Okay, unlike the Abrahamic faith, that's Christianity, Muslims decided to continue the Jewish practice of circumcision. In other words, this is an article entirely pre-modern, nothing pre-modern referred to in 636. We just haven't got there yet. And do we see any patriarchy in this? Not really. I mean, is Al-Baladuri criticizing him, saying anything negative? No. So no embedded patriarchy in this primary source. Okay. So then what happened? As I mentioned in the political events, you have Abu Bakr. And remember, the men's name are not important. I'm only going to be asking you about female names. Then Omar died, Uthman came, and then Uthman was killed. And who becomes the next caliph? Ali. And the Shi'at al-Ali are excited. Here is Ali, the husband of Fatima, the one who gave Muhammad grandchildren, finally is taking his position. The Shi'at al-Ali finally have their man in place. Ali is the new caliph. But who proves to be this first political challenge to Ali? Well, what did we see in that documentary? Aisha had a prominent political role. So let us look at this primary source. Rebels have murdered the innocent Uthman. Now, the rebels are not connected to Ali. They were disgruntled rebels, no connection to Ali. Okay? But what is Aisha's argument? Ali hasn't brought the murderers of Uthman to justice. Now remember, Aisha and Ali have had a long-running feud, so this kind of can serve now as a pretense for her to do what? A woman rallying troops to challenge Ali. Uthman, now remember, the capital of the Muslims was in, not Mecca. Mecca was the holy site, okay? But Medina, the second city, that was the capital. So the mischief has not been crushed. Now look at kind of even the political language, even back then that Aisha is using. This is being kind of you being passive aggressive, if you will. In other words, she's read between the lines. Ali have not crushed those behind this mischief, and it has not brought the murderers of Uthman. So what is she saying? We should seek vengeance, okay? And in other words, what is being practiced here? That of the vendetta. Now, the vendetta is the oldest form of, it sounds weird. The vendetta was a form of justice. Think of the phrase, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, okay? That comes from like ancient Babylonian times. In other words, if somebody has done you wrong, you do wrong to their tribe, justice has been restored. And this is what she wants. She wants vengeance. And so what happens? Okay. Here we have a battle emerging called the Battle of the Camel. And even the name of this battle has significance in terms of what it reveals about gender. And what does it reveal? The name of the battle refers to Aisha leading the troops while on the back of a camel. So this can be an exam image. And why is this significant? Okay, here you see Aisha on the left going into battle. Now, do you see her face? No, because in Islamic tradition, it's generally frowned upon to depict sanctified figures from the past. When I say generally frowned upon, do you have depiction of sanctified figures in Islamic art? Absolutely, but sometimes some artists said, best that I avoid it. And why was it frowned upon? Because Muslims were worried if we create images of holy figures, then those images would almost be worshipped as if they were idols. Who is meeting now? So here's Aisha on the left, okay, and her soldiers. Now, of course, who is she challenging? Ali. And who do we see on the right? Ali leading his forces into battle. And if you see kind of a flame around Ali, that is the significance of his sanctified reverence, right? And notice what he's carrying in his hand. If you notice, it's two hands with two prongs, okay? Ali possessed a sword that was the equivalent of the Muslim Excalibur of its time. What were those two prongs meant to do? Well, how did Ali dispatch of his enemies? He would turn the sword sideways and go for the center of the human body. What were those two prongs meant to do? To cut your spine in half. That's what the sword is known as, Zulfiqar, the spine splitter. And that was Ali's characteristic sword. Aisha's forces lost. Now, of course, what is this representing? As a powerful woman taking on the caliph, but it also represents the first Muslim civil war. Out of respect for Aisha, though, Ali did not humiliate her. He dispatched her back to Medina, where for all intents and purposes, she was kept under house arrest. Now, what happened to Ali after the success of this battle? Ali then faced his other great political challenge. Now, this is getting into political history and basically the affairs of men, but just bear with me because you're going to see its legacy later and its ramifications for women. Ali's next battlefield was with Muawiyah, the son of Hind, who started to gather forces in Damascus. To meet Muawiyah's threat, Ali gathered forces in what is today Iraq. And they met in battle. And again, Ali, who really never lost a battle in his lifetime, met Muawiyah's forces and was really slaughtering them. I mean, really giving them such a beating that Muawiyah's forces asked for clemency and to surrender and to negotiate their differences. Ali, seeing the kind of scale of the slaughter agreed. Some of Ali's partisans, who I guess back then would have been Shi'at Ali, were furious at their commander's decision to negotiate it. They basically said we should have eliminated the enemy when they were weak. And what did some of Ali's former soldiers do in revenge? They assassinated Ali in the back while he was praying. Leaving now what? A vacuum. That was the assassination of the fourth caliph. This worked out very well for Muawiyah. Muawiyah now declares the new capital of Islam is Damascus. And what does Muawiyah from that point onwards do? He no longer really has an election for the caliph. He gives the position to his son. And that giving that position to his son, the son was named Yazid. Don't worry about their spellings. I'll show it to you later, but it's not important. The women in this class are important. The minute that happened, what occurred? Ali's son, Hussein, in other words, the son of Fatima, the grandson of the Muhammad, when he saw that dynastic transfer take place, a good number of the Shi'at al-Ali told Hussein, raise a new army and challenge Muawiyah. What are you going to now see in this chart is trying to explain to you the sects that emerge as a result of these differences. Remember the Shi'at al-Ali that I mentioned, the supporters of Ali. Well, here they are in this green column known as Shia, right? The ones who assassinated Ali formed their own group called the Khawarij on the right. Don't worry about them. It's a hard name to pronounce and we're never going to deal with them again. All you need to know is this. From the followers of Ali, they then started to split into various groups. All you need to know is that the Shia that we refer to in the Muslim world today are predominantly 12ers. Why 12? I'll get into that number later. But also the other thing, if you believe in numerology, here's something weird for me. I happen to be a 12er, but it's also just every address I ever lived in my life, whether it was in Spain or in Encinitas, always had the number 12, which my mom loves. So now I've given away my religious background. On one side, I'm Christian. On the other side, I'm a 12er. And then what was the de facto camp? You see, the Shia would never form more than 10 to 15% of the Muslim population. The rest, those who were just not followers of Ali, became known as the Sunnis. The Sunnis don't really have sects. What they do have are different Islamic schools of thought. The one that you see is called Hanbali tends to be the most strict or literal. From the Hanbali school, it's going to emerge a group that you see in the square below it, the Deoband movement. The Deoband movement would give birth to the Taliban. And if you've heard about kind of the Taliban's legacy in Afghanistan, you know there were very, well, we could say misogynist and the kind of peak of patriarchy in terms of dealing with women. And of course, from the Hanbali, we're going to get another ultra patriotic misogynist group known as ISIS. Keep in mind, there is a separate square here called the Sufis. Okay, the Sufis are not a sect. The Sufis are an approach to the faith. And you could have Shia Sufis and Muslim Sufis. Basically, a Sufi is more of a mystic. And that's the best way I could translate it. And of course, I do have to talk about the Sufis because we're going to talk about a very prominent Sufi scholar later in today's lecture. And if you want to know the difference, the numbers, if you're interested just kind of in the theology, you can read this chart that was provided by The Economist. And from that chart, when you see the word Salafist or Wahhabis, okay, these tend to be not only more retrograde, or I could say less, well, basically more misogynistic towards women. They also have a very fierce rivalry with the Shias. So if you can see where it says foes, right? Remember when I said Hussein tried to lead an army to challenge now, not Muawiyah, but when he transferred power to his son Yazid, basically taking the caliph's position and making it a hereditary one. Hussein, the son of Fatima and Ali, the grandson of Muhammad, wanted to kind of defend the position of the caliph, which was, you know, we can't say it was democratic because the word democracy suggests something very modern, but proto-democratic. Okay. On his way to challenge Yazid, okay, and raising an army, he was intercepted by an army led by Yazid. And what happened to Hussein and about 70 members of his family? Yazid ordered them to be massacred on the spot. In other words, Hussein was not only killed, he was beheaded. His head was put on a spike. Now, he's being killed by fellow Muslims. This is the second episode of a Muslim civil war. And his head was brought back to Yazid, as well as the only survivor of Hussein's family, Hussein's older sister named Zainab. And Zainab is a name that you do have to know. Now, again, look at when Zainab is brought into chains in front of Yazid. So now not only is she face to face with the man who killed her brother and every single survived relative of her family. Okay. Look again how she shows, according to this primary source, no fear. And basically in the audience in the court of who is now the de facto caliph. You are the enemy of God. She's saying, I swear to God, okay, I hate you basically, but what can I do? I am so much in grief right now because you killed my Hussein and all my sisters and brothers, basically, okay. Now look how she kind of uses the wordplay. The Shia were known as the partisans of Ali. She is now calling Yazid the partisans of the devil. And now, in other words, these words are recited to this very day by the Shia. And again, this is poetic. We're not sure, are these the exact words she mentioned? So like with any primary source, we have to see who was witnessing it, who was writing it down. But these primary sources, of course, even though it's probably changed over time, you have to, what does it represent? It represents now a strong woman in the Shia tradition. So now we're going to see this difference between women being revered by Sunnis and Shia. Aisha being revered by Sunnis, Zainab and Fatima being revered by the Shia. And what is she saying? You will get your punishment on the day of judgment. So basically, again, just showing that women were not cowed during this period, that they were strong, that they were vocal, and they spoke truth to power. What's the consequence? Ah, shoot. Let me see if I can. Something about the mouse and Zoom just makes it go too fast. Zainab died in captivity in what is Damascus. And over her burial site, what was built? A shrine. And this is the shrine of Zainab. So for the Shia, this is a sacred place to go visit and ask for favors bestowed upon by Zainab. In other words, Zainab takes on kind of the position of, so what do we see? When you ask favors for somebody like Zainab, that's almost making Zainab a saint. And that's what we could say separates the Sunnis and the Shia. The same that separates Protestants and Catholics. Catholics often ask for saints to intercede on their behalf, as do the Shia. In other words, you would make a pilgrimage here. Just as if you would go to Spain, to go to the shrine of Santiago Compostela, to ask him to help you for a favor, so too Shias would do this in Damascus. And what does her shrine look like on the inside? Well, you could see just this very elaborate structure of blue tiles, gold, and crystals. And the gold is where the body of Zainab is housed. This is me, bad resolution, because this is an old-fashioned picture using something called film. You probably don't even remember what that is. And again, you can just see the practice of, in other words, men asking her for favors. That's an example of the divine feminine now being carried over into Shia Islam. This is a painting, and also always just remember to, if you see EI, that's an indication it could be an exam image. But always, you could always find text underneath, but now take good notes, because what am I telling you? This is produced by an Iranian artist. So now Iran is the largest Shia country to this day. Okay. And Farshjian, you can see his name there. I wouldn't expect, well, no, you could copy and paste it. It's a take-home exam. Farshjian is this Iranian painter famous for these very passionate, evocative paintings. In this particular painting, what are we seeing? The horse is supposed to be that of Hussein coming back into from battle without Hussein on it. In other words, Hussein has been felled in battle. He's already been decapitated. And what are you seeing here is women clad in black. We assume one of them is Zainab, mourning for the loss of her brother in battle. So in other words, we don't see the woman, not because this is an example of a man not willing to depict women, but because remember what I said, it's usually in these traditions, you don't want to depict with facial features somebody who has divine status. And by this time, Zainab is sanctified by the Shia, okay? So what do you have here? Well, remember the trope of the mourning mother or the mourning sister that began with Khansa. Well, we see this trope, this motif being carried on in Farshjian's picture, okay? So what is this picture? This is modern Iranian art depicting a pre-modern event. And when I say it's modern, Farshjian, of course, painted this by hand. Now, Farshjian's pictures are so sensitive and delicate to details. Actually, he draws with a brush made out of cat whiskers, which is tragic because cats maintain their balance and direction with their whiskers. So I can imagine a bunch of cats in Iran just walking in circles as a result of this painting. But it is mass reproduced by the Shia. It becomes the iconic image of the death of Hussein and the mourning of Zainab. Now, what happened during the Syrian civil war? Syria's government is ruled by a Shia government. and that Shia government was challenged by the Sunni majority in what begins a series of events called the Arab Spring. Now, in the following video, what are we going to see is not only a cult of Zainab, but a cult of Zainab being militarized. So in other words, Iraqi Shia volunteers who deployed to Syria, they weren't deploying so much to help the Syrian government as to protect the Shia shrine, okay? Because remember in the previous image, who do I say the Shia have a very antagonistic relation with? The Salafists and the Wahhabis, okay? The Salafists and Wahhabis, think ISIS. That would be a Salafist group. They deployed to the shrine to protect it from being blown up because the Salafists have blown up Shia shrines before. Okay. Now, if we look at the video, this video is modern. It's digital, in fact, because it's going to be uploaded onto YouTube. I'll see if it's still there. The link might be broken, okay? But look at this. You might not understand anything, but now from this point onwards, you'll be understanding the word Zainab. So let's see if it's still online. Should have checked if the link was broken ahead of time. Yeah, it's no, but sometimes I keep these videos on here just to show you something. How did it violate YouTube's term of service? This is a Shia militia. This is basically a call to arms. I think it's kind of bordering. I'm not sure. But I'll show you the video because, of course, somebody in my field, what you do, knowing that YouTube can remove it, of course, you download it. So let me pull it the downloaded video. Hell. Sorry. Technology problem. Just give me a second. I downloaded it, but it's on the hard drive. And it kind of... Come on. Where are you? There we go. Okay. Okay. So you're going to hear a phrase called Ya Zainab. And Ya Zainab is just take Ya, translated as O, and basically what is being repeated, O Zainab, O Zainab. In other words, we are the men fighting you to protect your shrine, okay? But it's an example of not only the divine feminine, but taken to kind of a militant point. So watch the following. Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab. Okay, there you go, mass produced, modern weapons. Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab. Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab. عين الغيور اللي يوقف على حدودك يا زينب، حرمة وغريبة والعدا يالونك يا زينب، السفوف هذا بتقر عيونك يا زينب، شفت الخدايم طاح العلم تونس يا زينب 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 يا زينب. وين ابو فهد الخلي يشيل الرايه يا زينب، الشام جالس بالضعن مشايه يا زينب، يقلب الثاني بس يا زينب، انك يا بنت المركله والزايه يا زينب يا زينب يا. And you get the idea. There's no need to watch the whole thing. So from this period, what else do we have? Remember the tension? So here you see, if the Shia revere Zainab, they tend to revile Aisha. And now what did we say? That the Shia also have a very tense relationship with the Wahhabis, the Salafis, the kind of hardcore Muslims that make up groups like ISIS, the Taliban. At the same time, though, you have Salafis in all the countries of the Middle East. You even have Salafi TV shows. You have Salafi satellite channels. And in this case, what I'm going to show you is a Salafi cooking show. Notice how the various prank callers get this Salafi cook very wound up. A second. I just gotta find that video from the hard drive. Okay. Now watch the following. And I want you to pay attention. Oh, wait. Sorry, I just lost it. Oh, hell. Let me just try playing this again. Okay, this should be coming up. There we go. All right. Notice how men. Okay, so in these cases, these are prank callers. Try to guess their sect from how they prank call. See how they get the Salafi cook wound up. And notice how they conduct their insults. And you'll pick up a very interesting Arab patriarchal habit of insulting women to get a man angry. Okay. And if any of you, I don't know, my class speak Arabic today, this is a tradition that continues to this very day. And then remember at the very beginning of this class how, you know, the insults that were used to kind of degrade or, refer to a hen. I won't repeat them. And here you see kind of this tradition being made manifest.
عجينتي بالشكل ده كده واحاول افردها في حدود من سنتي لثلاث ارباع سنتي. يوسف السلام عليكم. يوسف.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
يا اهلا بيك يا اهلا بيك، اتفضل.
اهلا بيك اهلا بيك. العجينة دي من حليب طبيعي من حليب الوهابيات ولا حليب ام المؤمنين عائشة؟
تصدق ان انت راجل نادل قوي، عشان انت كل مرة تخش باسم تاني، بتخش باسم سني وبتخش باسم راجل محترم، وبنستقبلك على التليفون انك انت انسان محترم وبتحترم حتى لو كنت انت راجل شيعي، وحتى لو كنت انت بتعتقد اعتقاد غير اعتقاد المسلمين، فيجب احترام المسلمين يا ندل. مش هقول اكتر من كده. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل فيك. بقول له حتى لو هو على اعتقاد خاطئ او على اعتقاد صح، يعني ما هو يعني هو لازم، يعني ما هم كفايه ان هم على خطأ، يعني احنا مش عايزين نتكلم يعني بيخش باسم مصطفى، باسم محمد، باسم احمد. انت لو راجل صح، يعني خش باسم كاظم، خش بالاسماء بتاعتكم احنا نفهم ان انت مين بالظبط يعني. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
استاذ امين السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
اتفضل يا اخي.
يا اخي شنو فضل فريد على بقية الطعام؟ شنو فضل عائشة على بقية؟
والله انتوا كلاب بصراحه يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي. نحط معلقه بصل. خلي بالكم انا برنامج طهي. يعني انت لو عايز تخش بحجه وكلام من ده وتتكلم، كلم شيخ، كلم برنامج شيوخ، يعني عشان الشيخ يقدر يرد عليك كويس، ويقدر يعني باذن الله يعني يظبطك يعني. فخلينا في الطهي بتاعي وخلينا في برنامج الطهي. ولكن انا عايز اقول لك حاجه واحده بس، والكل الشيعة تتصل، يعني لو سواء حد اتصل او ما اتصلش، بلاش كفايه يعني كفايه اللي في قلبنا من ناحيتكم، فما بلاش تكتروه يعني، خلونا كده ساكتين عليكم. لان لو في حكم اسلامي صح، لو في حكم اسلامي صح يعني انتوا مش هيكون لكم وجود ان شاء الله. واتقوا الله كده وخليكم كويسين يعني. انا عشت في العراق، عشت في العراق 4 سنين ونص، كان اجمل ايام حياتي، والله يرحمه صدام حسين، الله يرحمه، ما كانش مطلع عليكم صوت.
Okay. So what did we see there? You got to imagine what's happening is, you can tell from their accent. Imagine kind of, if you remember, if you watched The Simpsons, how Bart used to call Moe's Tavern and, you know, do these jokes on him and Moe would get furious and then you have Bart laughing in the corner. This is what some Iraqi Shias are doing. They're prank calling this show, while, you know, getting the chef really angry, okay? But what did he say? If there was a true Islamic government, none of you guys would exist. And sure enough, a few years later, that what he was looking for was this chef, in other words, a group like ISIS. And sure enough, if ISIS captured any Shia, the ISIS would kill those members, those Shia on the spot. One time, there was a bus caravan of 1,400 students that ISIS captured. 1,400 students they killed in a single afternoon. Okay, but take the men out of this. Do you see again what does this happen? You insult the women folk. What are you telling this Salafi chef? You can't defend their honor. We've made the insult. You are unable to defend the honor, and then harm done. Okay, those are the major events that just happened within 50 years after the death of Muhammad. So in the following lecture now, we're going to take this kind of large overview of what happens in the intervening period from the Shia-Sunni split to the rise of the gunpowder empire. Thank you.